Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Pod and the Pendulum, the horror movie podcast that covers all the franchises, one movie and one episode at a time. I'm your host, Mike Snoonian, and I'm joined today as he's sitting in that laundry basket next to me, ready to go flying down that stairwell, the co-host of the Spectre Cinema Club, Mr. Devon Taylor. Devon, how are we?
Hello, hello. I am fantastic in for round 5. Very excited. And it's so funny because the laundry basket did give me vibes of like a thing that me and my sisters did as kids. We would, there was like big, like 50-gallon, like kind of plastic buckets that people like usually like bob for apples in or put laundry in, whatever. We would take 2 of them and you'd get inside and you'd take 2 of them and then we would like use like a towel to like tie the handles together so it like make like a capsule essentially, and then we just like, and then we'd roll each other like around the backyard and like in the basement and literally down the stairs.
So I was going to save this question, but let's skip ahead then, because that maybe is a good for, and folks, we're here to talk about not Paranormal Activity 5, because it's not called that, but Paranormal Activity, the marked ones. So just in case you somehow like blindly stumbled upon this podcast, didn't look at the title of the movie somehow, like that's what we're here to talk about today. And I was going to ask this in our initial thoughts. Like what were some of the dumber stunts that you pulled as a kid with your best friends? Like the jackassery type stunts that you would have done. So that is a really good one. The putting yourself in like the bobbing for apple buckets and then throwing yourself down a hill is a good one.
Yeah, that was like the more wholesome stuff with like my sisters and whatnot. Like, and growing up, I didn't really do like, I wasn't a crazy kid because I was terrified of my father. So like I didn't. So it wasn't until college whenever like the dumbassery really began. And so at our college, there were like there was like a track, not a track, but like the bus line like had its like own like little track area, like the campus bus. And so it would like kind of go around and there would be these parking gates that would like go up and down, like, you know, just like a 10-foot long, like wooden, like 2x4 type deal. And they would like go up and down or whatnot. And of course, they would get broken, like if somebody like accidentally like drove through it or something or like whatever, and they would replace them super fast. So we were like, they seem to really be on top of this stuff. So then we started breaking them on purpose and then stealing them. And so like so when you went back to our house, we literally had like 7 of these parking gates just like stashed around the house randomly. God. And we like, sometimes you would like do it on your own, you know, but then some nights we would like literally do these like gate heists, like the 3 of us, we'd all be on our longboards. And so like the first person in the front of the line would break the gate. And then the 2 people behind would then skateboard the gate back to our house.
That's excellent.
So that was like our main like college. I mean, when you had a party house, that was like your decoration anyways, was just shit you stole from around town. So we had like all sorts of parking cones and like signs and like randomness. Like it was a junkyard in our house.
You would have that next to like the milk crate furniture. Like you would use the parking cone as like a drink coaster basically to put your natty ice.
I don't think we had a regular coffee table in our house. No.
So we would in college, like I went to like one where there would get a lot of snow, and we would routinely strip down to our boxer shorts after a snowstorm, and we would jump out of the 2nd-story dorm window into the snowbanks below and like run back around the building into the dorm. So you would risk, you know, a pretty bad fall for one. Like once the snow got packed, like we could have really fucked ourselves up. Like once the snow was no longer soft and fluffy from like dozens of jumps out the window, and also like hypothermia because like you wouldn't jump out of the window with your ID card, or if you did, if you dropped it on the fall. So if like you didn't bring your ID card and then like your asshole dorm mates were like, oh, we're not going to let you back in, you're standing out there in the freezing cold in your boxer shorts or underwear, waiting to get back, let back into the dorms. So that was like one that we would do on a pretty routine basis. And then, you know, Freezart took us off.
That sounds very Massachusetts-esque.
Yeah,
it's
it's
maybe the most
definitely-
Massachusetts story you've told.
Yeah, that's definitely one of them. Not really like a physical prank, but I went to like a Catholic college until they asked me to not come back in between semesters my third year. They're like, it would be better for everybody if you just didn't come back. We don't really want your money at this point. And this wasn't the reason, but I'm sure it didn't help, is at one point we made a bunch of stickers, or I did not make them, but I helped put them up. There were like stickers of like Pope John Paul masturbating with like a target around his face, like a sniper rifle target. And we would just randomly stick those up wherever we could on campus. And we were never really caught as the culprits for doing that, but
there were murmurs going around of the Pope sticker gang,
and it was around that time. Like it was the same year that like the Andre the Giant Obey stickers became a thing. Like I don't know if I'm dating myself, if people even remember those, but there used to be like these stickers of just Andre the Giant and that just said obey. Which, I mean, like, look, if Andre the Giant told me to do something, I would listen. The dude was massive. But they were just everywhere. And it originated at RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, which was a school right near us. I forget the artist name that did it. It wasn't Banksy. Who's the guy that did the Hope posters for Obama?
Oh, I don't know the name off the top of my head.
Listeners, tweet at us with that. He's the one that did these stickers. So obviously the Pope masturbating with like the sniper rifle target over his face, those did not take off in the same way. They did not have the same cultural cachet, needless to say. So that would be something else. But yeah, Paranormal Activity, the marked ones. Before we dive into the background, let's do a quick little moment here. Where are we with the series at this point, Devon? How are we feeling after part 4 and as we're about to dive into the marked ones? Where are we at?
Yeah, so I mean, we talked in part 4 that this one and 4 should have been swapped. Like as far as like the like release order, because, you know, we were kind of, you go into 4, it started feeling a little bit, you know, repetitive and things like that. And then this is like, you know, that little fresh kick, and it's, and which I love. I think this one brought just like a very different energy. Like, I mean, there's a lot of things that are much different in this film versus some of the other ones. So like, I feel like that energy kick would have been nice as the 4th movie that came out. And then, so then when we loop back around to Katie and Christy, then it's like, okay, now we're back. We took some time away. And I think even that would have made 4 hit a little bit harder, even if nothing changed in 4. Just like having it released after this one, I think would have did a lot for the series. But I like when the series has, you know, because we don't really have too many franchises where there's like a true like spin-off, you know, in the universe. And this one does, you know, it still feels in the franchise, but at the same time, like, this is also like one that, like, you know, barring all the time loop stuff in the 3rd act, could stand on its own as its own kind of film, in a way. I think that's what a nice, you know, side quel does, is, can stand on its own while still having the callback and Easter eggs to the other ones. So having this one in the series does like kind of give you like a little bit of a, okay, like not a reset, but as far as like in your brain now, I'm like, okay, like we're doing some different stuff now, and I'm not firmly in the formula of what happens in the first 4 films.
Yeah, it's really like The Conjuring is the only franchise I can think of that has like truly successful spin-off movies, and that's a very recent phenomenon. And then you have like Scream and Scream the television show, which spun off the movies, and that's really like Scream in name only. Like, we're going to do a slasher TV show and call it Scream. Like, you could have called that television show really anything else, because it has nothing to do with like the Woodsboro murders or the television or the film franchise whatsoever. So really, The Conjuring is all I can think of that is like a true tried and blue spinoff, like off the top of my head. I mean, maybe some of the classic monster movies where you like team monsters up and fade in and out.
But then those ones were even, but in even those ones were like more loosely connected.
Exactly.
So like we like kind of went through like some of the Frankenstein movies. It's like, yeah, it is a series, but at the same time, it's like more of a string of loosely related films. I still haven't watched the Scream TV series though. I've heard people have very strong opinions about it.
I really like the first 2 seasons and the Halloween special, and wish they had a chance to like properly wrap it up. Like it took a little time, but it grew on me. And the 3rd season, from what I understand, is just like a wet fart. I think I watched like the first half of the first episode. I think it was like dumped all at once. I wish they had a chance to properly finish it. I ended up really enjoying it for what it was. It's definitely, I would say that if you're ever like home with like, the flu or a bad cold and you just want to like binge something for a couple days and you're all out of stuff, it's like not a bad thing. It's like pretty good comfort slasher, and it's actually pretty solid. And I think like Ty West directs some episodes. Like, you actually get some pretty good horror royalty directing some of the episodes in it. I really enjoyed ended up enjoying it for what it was. But not to make this all about Scream, which is something that I can do from time to time. I'm going to get a little controversial here and say I feel like you could have just not done Paranormal Activity 4. I think I was kind of on that, leaning that way last week. That like the first 3 movies make for like a really solid trilogy of films, and it wraps up like the Katie Christie story in a nice bow. And if that was all they did with like those characters in terms of a core story, that would have been really tight. And then you do what you do mostly here, which is like, oh, here are the videotapes. Oh, here are the 2 girls in like a ghostly apparition. Oh, here is the house from the 3rd movie. That is, the grandmother's house. Like, that's actually pretty neat. And maybe, this will be controversial, maybe Paranormal Activity 4 is the ghost dimension. Like, it starts a new story. Which we'll talk more about that last week. I like that we step away from Katie and Christy, and they're kind of more in the back of our mind as Easter eggs until you get till the 3rd act, which we'll talk about when we talk about this movie at the end of it. 'Cause when we get to the 3rd act, I would like to make a complaint or two.
Oh, I totally get what you're going for. And yeah, because I think I'm also in agreement that the first 3 is such a nice trilogy, and the format of the franchise maybe let it down a little bit in the back end. I mean, because I don't have like, I'm not like offended. I wasn't like offended by 4 or anything, but at the same time, like, yeah, it doesn't really have as much purpose to exist, rather than just like, okay, like let's keep going. And because Ghost Dimension is also like, it does loop back into, you know, the Katie and Christy stuff, but like even more loosely than this film does.
Yeah.
Because this film, like, it stays away from Katie and Christy until like in the third act. Then it's like, okay, now it's like they almost like got cold feet of it being its own thing. And then like in the third act, they go, okay, we need to add in more Katie and Christy stuff.
It feels like because you have Christopher Landon, who is like the architect. He's really like, once you get away from part one, which is purely Oren Peli's baby, and Oren Peli is on hand as like a producer for, you know, all of the movies. And Landon talks about how like he and Peli and Jason Blum kind of all sit together and kind of like hash out where the series is going to go. But to me, it feels like from part two onwards, like Christopher Landon is like kind of the Don Mancini of these movies. Like he's the one that is kind of the architect of them. And it almost feels like a lack of confidence in not tying in those original characters in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's like, it's nice having, you know, obviously like having somebody to shepherd along the series and like kind of keep things consistent in a certain way. But at the same time, like when you do that, then the franchise kind of lives and dies by, you know, that person's decisions. And, you know, and I wonder if like, even if Landon was kind of doing this like later in his career, like because I mean this is like still pretty early on in his career, like maybe if he was like a little bit more seasoned, how I wonder how he would approach the series and which directions to take it in. But you know, he was figuring it out. We're kind of seeing a director become a, you know, artist like in real time, since this is, you know, the first one they actually directed, not just writing.
So let's talk about him a little bit, and let's talk about how this one came together. And we kind of hinted at it here, but even the producers and even Landon, they see 4 as a misstep, like, and they're pretty open about it. And in the interviews on the press junket, the journalists that are talking to Landon, like, they're straight up asking him, like, where did you go wrong with part 4? And like, when like reading some of the interviews that Landon did ahead of the marked ones, it actually kind of felt like an apology tour at times. And I pulled up like one quote that Landon did with mandatory.com, where he's like really open. He's like, I think our biggest failure or misstep was asking so many questions with absolutely no answers. It was sort of like dropping our fans in the middle of a narrative. It was sort of like dropping our fans in the middle of a narrative wasteland. And we were like, here, you figure it out. And that is something like we talked about last week. Like, we're asking all of these new questions and answering nothing else. And I kind of feel like he does the same thing here. Like, he's saying this on the press junket for the marked ones, but I feel like this movie kind of does the same thing. Like, he introduces time travel in this movie and then drops like Jesse in the middle of the end of the first movie with 1 minute to go and is like, right, that's it, that's all, folks, credits.
Yeah, it's like he overcorrected by being like, okay, we're gonna give you too many answers now, like, because I mean they give us the name of the coven, they give us time travel, we get loops, we basically get like what the coven's whole plan is, like, actually laid out, like, of like what they actually want. And it's fascinating because, like, again, I wonder if he would have had the confidence to do the different stuff and like kind of be a little bit more audacious with this one if 4 wasn't, you know, received the way that it was. Because for me, 4 is like the safest of any of the films in the franchise, and that's its biggest qualm for me. So it's like, I feel like he goes, okay, well, I can't play it safe on this one, but then does he overcorrect in this one by going, you know, because like it was everything was working, like you said, like until the third act, then he just way too much comes in, and then you're asking yourself questions, and while you're asking yourself questions, you're missing what's happening in the finale, which is also kind of nothing.
What do you think? I know we talked a little bit about this in the last episode, but what do you think it is about 4 that makes it feel so safe? Because I agree with that assessment. What do you think it is that makes it feel so safe?
Again, it felt like it was the greatest hits. It was like
Yeah.
it was like a compilation CD or something, like, because it was like, okay, like, hey, you like leg pulls, let's give you another one. Hey, you like this, let's give you another one. Like, I like it that in this one, with a lot of like the staple Paranormal Activity hallmarks are not in this one.
Yeah.
Like, we do get a lot more originality with some of the things. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. But I will take that, making mistakes rather than, just like not putting in the effort and playing it safe like Ford did.
Yeah, and there's a reason, and I'm really glad you touched on that, on like not playing it safe in this one so much and introducing some different things. So the reason why that they feel like the producers feel like they can do that is after the marked one is announced, they say, look, it's not really a true sequel. Like, we're not calling it Paranormal Activity 5 for a specific reason. It's a cousin to the series. And Landon, who had written part 2, 3, and 4, he's going to move over to the director's chair. And he would talk about wanting to move away from the haunted house tropes that had marked really all 4 of the previous movies. Like, each of the movies, like, you're in like a very suburban area. They're all like upper middle class homes, and you're following one family for 90 minutes as they're trying to figure out what's going on. And he's moving away from that, and now he wanted to be more enmeshed in a community, but he wanted to also embrace possession horror. And he felt like with what they had introduced in parts 3 and 4, that he felt emboldened to do that he could swing in that direction. And what do we know about Landon? Like you mentioned, he was more early days in his career. Like, he's got like a pretty solid resume overall, and he's someone that I think he loves time travel. He's someone that as a kid probably watched Back to the Future a lot. Like a real lot. But like, what does his resume look like? And do we feel there are more swings and hits than misses?
I think he has a really solid filmography. I enjoyed all of his films. I remember whenever Scout's Guide to Zombie Apocalypse came in, and as not a zombie fan, like, that one was something that I really enjoyed, and you can kind of see he likes he not only likes his time travel, he likes coming of age stories as well. Because between Freaky, Happy Death Day, Scout's Guide, and then this one, these are all films that have something to do with coming of age and like kind of the horrors that you can weave into it. So I like seeing the seedlings of that in this film, which is like one of the big subgenres that this one introduces, is this coming of age story. So yeah, I like his filmography overall, and I think it made sense because, one, possession films were very popular around this time. We were kind of getting a lot of them, but then I had mentioned before, like, the series is called Paranormal Activity when it's not paranormal, it's demonic, like, and we kind of know this fairly early on. So like, I like that. Yeah, this is finally the one that is like. Because there is still haunted house elements, just subverted ones. But I like that we're not like kind of playing the charade of like, hey, we know that this is a demonic possession thing. Why are we still trying to? Because that's what 4 also felt like. It's like by the 4th film, we already know that this is something else, but yet we're still trying to disguise the film as a haunted house film when we know it's not a haunted house film anymore.
No. And I think that my only issue here is that when saying that he wants it to stand on his own, that he doesn't want it to be PA5, I feel like that last act when he goes so hard in tying it into the first 3 movies. Like, I don't mind the things like, oh, here are the tapes, like they just kind of show up, or even having Allie Ray show in. Like, I don't mind that kind of world building, like having those little hints at it there. But then having most of the action exist outside of those movies, it's like and even having the midwife, like the Coven's home base, be kind of based out of the grandmother's house. Like, I think that's actually pretty cool. Like, like, hey, the Golden Girls need a home, and this is like going to be their headquarters. That's actually pretty neat. I don't mind that whatsoever. But I think it's like when you drop them like literally into the end of the first movie, that's when it's like it makes it harder to say, well, this movie stands on its own. Because now I'm thinking more about that first movie than anything I saw here. So
Yeah, it's like, we gave them a lot of credit in 2 and 3 on how much they were able to like kind of retrofit, the lore with what was given in 1. But like you said, like in this, once that happens, I remember the first time being like, oh, this is cool. Like, because like we did never see what Katie was screaming at in the first movie. So it's like, oh, okay, now we know. But then it raises, 6 other questions about, okay, wait, hold on a sec. Is this person here? And like, because I thought the, the little bits, the way that they folded in were really cool. Like whenever we see the picture of Jesse's mom with Grandma Lois, and it's like, oh shit, like, hey, look, it's Lois. So it's like, I like the little sprinklings, like seeing the box of videotapes with Katie and Christy's name on it, and things like that. But then it goes a little bit too hard when it's like, okay, like we were having fun with this. Now we're really trying to, I don't know, blow people's minds, I guess, by doing it.
It's like little things I like in Stephen King in his novel 12/22/63. He has a scene in that where his main character, when he's traveling back in time, winds up in Derry, and for like a brief scene, he encounters Bev Marsh and Richie. I believe it's Richie Tozier. It's been years since I've read the book, but he encounters them in Derry for like a really quick scene, and it doesn't really tie into the rest of the story, but it shows like these worlds are somehow connected. And I think like at one point, like Pennywise shows up in the Tommyknockers, and then you have all the stuff with like Stephen King in Castle Rock, in all of how all the stories, although they're not necessarily like, you don't have to read them all in order to understand them, he builds this like really cool world where they'll drop like references to like Sheriff Frank Bannerman and Cujo in like The Dark Half or Pet Cemetery. And it just makes you feel like you're in the know, but you by no means have to read both of them to appreciate the story. And I love, you're kind of doing that for a lot of this movie here when you show the tapes. Like, what are these videotapes? You don't necessarily need to see the other movies to like appreciate it, but when you have it, like, it's a cool little Easter egg.
Yeah, I mean, the scope on this one is kind of expanded big time, especially when you see Oscar's research closet, and they're like saying like, oh my god, it's like, look, these headlines are in different languages, so it's like it's happening not only around the country, around the world apparently, the midwives. So it's like they kind of busted it open to where they're like, okay, like this is like, now we can kind of open it up to kind of do other things. But then it's like, you're doing this in the 5th film is it too little too late, because it's like we get Ghost Dimension, next of kin, but then we don't really there hasn't been any talks about another one recently. But it's like, again, if this would have been in the 4th film, then it's like, okay, now we kind of have avenues we can go, by having this larger scope to it. But again, it's like in the 5th slot, it's like it's a little disappointing almost.
Do you think the midwives have like branches all throughout? Like, is there like a Northeast midwives? Is there like a Southeastern Florida Midwives Association going on?
Apparently. I guess, because we do see, like you said, like Lois's house is like kind of the base for, I guess, for SoCal midwives, for the SoCal district. But yeah, again, apparently, like according to Oscar's closet, like they're everywhere. Like they.
Excellent. So the reason why they focus on the possession angle is, like Landon talked in some interviews, originally the story was going to be more focused on the coven and more on the Brujera, like the kind of like Latino style of witchcraft or study of witchcraft in that culture, but he didn't feel like he could quite break that story, so he shifted gears as he was coming up with and writing the story and made it more of like the religious horror and possession angle.
Yeah, and I mean, I can see why they didn't go that route, because I feel like that is when having a Latinx director would have been nice, because it would have it definitely would have felt a little bit more odd if you're having, this white guy go into, Mexican style witchcraft and things like that. So I would assume that is maybe part of the reason they didn't go into that, and then kind of stuck with the possession angle, but then kind of sprinkled it in. But if you do want some of that, Ash vs. Evil Dead does feature the Brujo like pretty prominently. Like one of the main characters becomes a Brujo. Mm-hmm. So they explore a lot of that in Ash vs. Evil Dead.
Cool. So his other thing is he wanted to make the film feel much more energetic, more upbeat, have a faster pace, and that was the reason for the handheld cameras instead of the static camera shots, which the series was best known for. His idea was like really take the audience on what Landon would call like a roller coaster ride, and he'd like basically he would go on to describe the movie in some interviews as more of a comedy in parts. And especially like in that first act, he would say, look, we kind of like wanted to make the movie funny, especially when you got to know like Jesse and Hector and Marisol. And I think you see a lot of that, especially in the extended cut, as you get to know the characters. Like there are moments like when the two guys are just kind of like goofing around where like it's kind of like very charming, much more so than I think in like any of the other movies.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I feel like this film has such a distinct energy from the other films. It is more fun. It is more upbeat. I will say that it will go into my qualms later that it isn't as scary as the rest of the franchise. However, I do like the switch up, like you said, like of getting to watch this coming of age. I mean, it's like they just graduated, so it's like the last summer before like going off and doing like adult shit. So it has that. It definitely has that energy to it, and easily the most humor out of any of the entries as well. Like this is like a legit really funny movie, actually. Like I found myself laughing out loud like quite a bit. I was like yeah, this is and again like that Landon is kind of known for his mixtures of horror and comedy. So I think that is definitely the most successful as far as the intentions that he had going into this film, because the energy change was noticeable and very welcomed.
Yeah. And Paramount themselves, like they were actually very interested in centering a cast of Latino characters in a horror movie. They kind of felt like this is a really untapped opportunity, and they really wanted to expand the market. Like they actually talked about, and they had talked about this after Paranormal Activity, like creating a division where they were going to do like a number of like low budget $1 million horror movies that they would release theatrically. And they had done that with films like The Devil Inside. That kind of petered out pretty quickly. And they had talked about, well, what if we create like a number of movies that are geared towards like specific demographics that maybe we don't always target. And they specifically talked about how like the Latino community was underserved in the marketplace. And
yeah, I mean, I think that's an idea that I wish they would have kept going with, like because like in theory it's like, yeah, like you should be like being able to not trying to make films that are satisfying all that you can, like lean into some of this. And like, we see it a little bit, like obviously with the Purge movies, they kind of had some flexibility and like, doing that to like, cater to specific audiences. And it almost also feels like a like apology for the way that they treated the housekeeper in 2. It's like,
Handsy. Poor Martine.
So it's like, yes, Martine. So it's like, it's almost like, okay, like we see that like we were maybe a little stereotypical with her. So like, let's like kind of get to, show some true love to the Latino community. And I mean, and it makes sense too that the series being based in SoCal, so it's like it makes sense that there would it kind of be more representation there. And and I think they did it really well with like good intentions. Because like I know a lot of people might ask like, oh, like, should Landon have been the one to direct it? I think it's fine that he did. As long as it's handled with care and you have the right intentions about it, that's totally fine. I mean, like Quentin Tarantino doing Django Unchained, like, you wouldn't think that, this film that is like very impactful for like Black liberation would be done by this white guy, but like he does it with such care and reverence, and I think, again, like them not leaning into the Brujeria kind of angle, it kept it from not being too schlocky or from it like being like, okay, Landon, you're a bit out of your depths here. But I think there's enough like authenticity that is brought in the film. And I'm assuming they probably had like consultants on hand for some of these things.
He talks about some of the focus groups from other films and persons he spoke with. I've got an article I'll bring up later that I believe it was in Bloody Disgusting that talks about some of the areas in particular that they felt Landon got right, especially when it comes to like the religious horror and how it serves that community. Like that was a real check mark in his favor. But just in general, like it feels like when studios like look at underserved markets and say like, let's create some stories for them, audiences, like that audience tends to turn out. Like, as long as it's not pandering to them, like, the audiences will turn out for them. Like, it just makes sense to do that because people, like, want to see themselves on screen. Like, they identify in characters, they identify with the stories, and they want to see their stories or see their identities brought to screen. Like, that is not, that's nothing new and that's nothing unique. And that's why, like, audiences will turn out. So it would make sense to want to kind of bring that up. Like, I don't understand why that would be like a big, scary idea. And especially for something like this, which really represents like such a low risk. Like they're so little, they cost so little to make. And they've already made, like, you're not going to lose any money making one of these movies. It's impossible to. It's just like, it's so like, why wouldn't you want to do something like that? So, well, film doesn't really wrap shooting until July, and because Paramount needed time to like properly edit and promote it, the traditional Halloween season release was pushed back. So it missed its October release date, and it was pushed to January of 2014. The studio ran a promotion for users where they could record their reactions to a video that was on the main site for a chance to win an Xbox One console. So that Microsoft partnership back in play again, which kind of neat, play a big scaredy cat and win an Xbox. What do you think?
I mean, I love seeing like the evolution of their marketing tactics as they've kind of went from the simple just like asking the demand thing
demanding, not asking, demanding.
Yes, demanding. But so going from that to like now doing that, I mean, it makes sense coming off the Xbox Connect tie-in from 4. So I feel like that's like kind of a funny like step up and be like, hey, you that Connect in 4 was cool, right? Okay, we'll do your trailer reaction for 5, and you might actually get it. Is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I mean, it feels very 2014 for sure, and I'm glad that they, even though like yes, it is always nice to get the October release, horror movie around Halloween season. But at the same time, at least if they were going to do that, then I think we probably would have gotten a worse product if they, because again, I feel like that was another thing for 4. It felt a little bit rushed in a way. So it's like with them realizing like, okay, hey, like we're not going to make the release date for this. So like, let's continue to take our time and like, do this properly.
Well, along with the not hitting the October date, it's also the only film in the series that doesn't feature the camera point of view on the poster. And I kind of it has like I believe it's Oscar that's on the poster, where he has kind of the ghost face kind of look to him. It's kind of that kind of a negative photo image, kind of blurred out. And I'm wondering, like, when you saw like the advertisements for this film, did it feel like a Paranormal Activity movie to you, or did it feel like something different?
It still felt like a Paranormal Activity movie, but it did feel distinctly different though. I immediately, like, whenever I had heard like, okay, it's a spin-off side cool thing, and then once I started seeing the promotion for it, I was like, okay, this does feel totally different. I also think this is the only Paranormal Activity film I saw in theaters.
Okay.
Because this came out in my freshman, sophomore year of college. So this was actually the only one that I did see in theaters. I mean, I don't really like the poster with Jesse on the front. I mean, it's fine, I guess, but I don't know, it's kind of a little hokey. But I really love the other main poster, which is like the like Catholic priest with the sugar skull makeup on its face. I think that's a super cool poster. I think maybe the best poster of the series.
Yeah, one of the cooler looking ones. Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of the other ones are just people in bed sleeping. It's like, that's not necessarily that scary, you know? So I do think that maybe like that kind of hurts the perception of it a bit. Like it's, you know, it's the first movie not released for the series since 2009, like every year. So you get like one in 09, 10, 11, 12. It's the first one that kind of misses that date. And because it comes out in January, it's kind of seen as like a dumping ground. And we don't really get that anymore. Like now, January rolls around and you're kind of like rubbing your hands together with a little bit of glee. Like, what's going to be like the good horror movie that comes out? Like a couple years ago, it was Megan. This year, it was...
Oh, yeah. Blumhouse is like kind of... claimed ownership of January the past few years, because they see that like people always think it's a dumping site, but it's like, hey, no, this is a open field is what they see.
Yeah, and people will turn out. It's that early year you can get something that people will turn out to see. There's really honestly no time of year now where even August, it used to be like January, February, and then like late July, August was when studios dumped things, and now there's really no like dead period at this point. It just feels like, you know, you're gonna hopefully get some quality stuff throughout the year. Like horror's like ramping up now. Like I'm hoping to go see the new Omen movie later on, and I'm pretty excited because I'm hearing good things about that.
This April is actually stacked.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff.
Immaculate.
But yeah, we definitely do
Devil.
we definitely do get more of a spread now, because it's like even after you come out of the summer for like blockbusters, then it's like fall is for like all the award season stuff, and that stuff is pushed in theaters a lot more than they used to be. So yeah, there kind of really isn't a dead spot anymore.
Yep. Yeah, even with like streaming, like too many movies like bypassing theaters and going to streaming, which we'll kind of mention here in a second. So I was going to say, like, this movie, and I kind of call it like the Cousin Oliver status. If you're a Brady Bunch fan, you know what I'm talking about. Devon, do you get that reference?
I was not a Brady Bunch kid.
All right. So for those that don't know, Cousin Oliver, last season of the Brady Bunch, they introduced like a blonde hair, wears glasses, kind of looks like if John Denver was a little person. That would be Cousin Oliver. He's a little moppet that basically, you know, cute little kid that gets introduced when like the ratings are starting to sag. So, you know, this movie kind of has that Cousin Oliver status. It still does remarkably well. It doesn't debut at #1 at the box office, but really that's only because it bumps up against the juggernaut that's Frozen, which was holding strong at the box office despite being out for 7 weeks already. So I just kind of made a note of remembering when Disney released movies in theaters and people paid to go see them. Like, what wild times those used to be.
That is crazy.
Just bizarre.
But yeah, again, like and when you like kind of look at the numbers, you know, comparatively, because like, you know, 4, even though is, you know, pretty poorly received, still did really good numbers coming off the heels of 3. So it's like, again, if they would have did this one after 3, they could have kept the momentum going a little bit more with it.
Yeah, you might have gotten a couple more movies out of it before you ended things, because really the wheels fall off with the next movie. This one pulls in over 18 million, so still more than triple what it cost to make. Either triple or up to 5 times. Like, I couldn't quite get a feel for the budget, but opening weekend it pulls in 18 million. By the end of its run, it makes 32 million in the US, almost 60 million across the globe. So it's still like just shy of 91 million bucks. It's the lowest total to date. But again, these movies like cost so little to make. And I put like the note here, like being the lowest total. I kind of call it like the Jason Lives New Nightmare syndrome, where you have like what is like a superior movie in the franchise doing much worse at the box office because like the entry before it killed off any enthusiasm for the franchise. So you have with like Jason Lives, you have like A New Beginning, Friday the 13th Part 5, which at the time like fans really revolted against because it didn't have Jason and it had Roy the ambulance driver. With New Nightmare, you had like Freddy, Freddy's Dead right before it, which I really love. I think it's a great Irish wake. It's a really fun comedy, but fans don't love that one. They think it's really silly. So like New Nightmare doesn't do that well at the box office despite Wes Craven returning, because like it's not the fault Jason Lives or New Nightmare, it's that fans are kind of like sick of the series by then.
Yeah, I saw that you also made the note about Saw 6. That happened with Saw 6 as well, because people were kind of a little bit bored after 5 that they didn't like kind of show out, and it like took a huge numbers difference. Yeah, which is crazy again, like when you look at them side by side, because like Paranormal Activity 4 brought in 140 million, you know, so it's like, and for, you know, how low that is on a lot of people's lists is kind of fascinating seeing that number side by side with this one, which is definitely a way better film.
Yeah, that's a huge drop off. Like we were talking like $91 million that this movie made, and you would think that as a studio, considering that it costs at most like 7 or 8 million, you're like, you'd be thrilled. Like, man, that's huge. But I think what you're looking at is not what it brought in, but like what a huge gap it was in between them. And you're like starting to get like a little bit nervous. So I can see where they're looking to end things at this point.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer that it's like, even though it's like, oh, you're, you know, kind of introducing some new energy, but then like it's like, but you know, like you're still past your prime a little bit. It's like the tires are still a little worn, I suppose. So yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer.
It's really hard for franchises, I think, to recover once they have a entry that like fans turn against. Like the only I'm trying to think, like really Halloween is the only series I can think of off the top of my head that has like you have Halloween Resurrection that comes out and fans really hate that one. And then they take a few years off and they have the Rob Zombie entries, which do really well, but at the time, no one seemed to like whatsoever. And then they go on hiatus again, and then you have David Gordon Green's Halloween come out in 2018, and that one does, like, gangbuster numbers. That's, like, the only example I can think of where a franchise, like, kind of, like, fully recovers from the damage that, like... And with Halloween, it's, like, years of like low returns. Like the only successful one since like part 2 or 4 had been like H2O.
Actually, I just thought of an example that not only recovered, but is debatably at its highest point at the moment, is the Chucky series.
That's a good one.
After Seed of Chucky, we didn't get another film for, I think it was like, because that was 2000, so it was like a good 11 years before Curse of Chucky came out.
Yeah.
So but then it was able to gather itself with Curse and Cult of Chucky, and then now it's on to the TV show. I mean, why isn't there a Paranormal Activity TV series? Like, I think at this point, like, because like, even though it kind of sucks that it fizzled out, but I mean, there's still 7 movies. So like, if you were gonna go somewhere else, I think Paranormal Activity could work as a TV series.
Could like do it as a pseudo reality show.
Yes.
Yeah, it could work like that. You could do a lot. It feels like it's wide open to do stuff. So, well, we've been kind of doing it as we've done the background here. We've kind of like intermixed some movie talk as we've done this here. So, but let's dive more into that movie discussion. And I think let's kick things off with like, why are you filming? I think Ariel introduced the section to this series. And I think of all the ones we've covered, this is the one that really stretches the credulity of like filming throughout it. Like, especially when you get to that third act, there's no reason for them to be filming, especially because they're using like the handheld cameras throughout it. Once you get to the third act and they get smashed into by another car, put the camera down and just like go help your friend, right? Like, this is the one that stretches it the most.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, not only the why are you still filming, but then also just even why are you filming this to begin with is not given in this film. Like, it literally is just Jesse sees a family member with a camera at his graduation and goes, oh, hey, I want a camera. And then he just buys a camera and then just starts, like, so he didn't have, like, any motivation. There wasn't like, oh, this happened, I need to start recording. So really, there's already no reason to be filming at all. There'll be times that Hector just picks up Hector will walk into his house while he's still sleeping, turn the camera on, start recording, and then go wake Jesse up. So it's just like, there's really no reason for this to be found footage. Like, I mean, but I guess maybe doing a spin-off and shifting the format would have been too much, because like this would be fine not being a found footage film. Like, if everything was exactly the same, except for the characters being the one filming stuff, this doesn't need to be found footage, like, literally at all. And then even when they are recording to like the weird shit that's happening, they don't do anything. Like, there's a point where Hector's like, we have the footage, let's show his dad, let's show the cops. And Marisol just goes, nobody's going to believe us. And it's like, wait, you have video proof. What do you mean nobody's going to believe you? So there's just kind of no sense to the found footage in this at all, really.
There's like one point in the movie where they post some of the footage on YouTube of like Jesse doing like the crazy superhero stuff. And everyone is like, what are you using for your, like editing software to make it look like this? And they're like, fuck. And I guess like that actually is a pretty good point, like, because editing software and like being able to make your own movies on the cheap has gotten so democratic, and that almost anyone can use it, in that you can like doctor footage to look like this now. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can almost... You're like, oh, look at this thing that looks totally real that happened. And you're like, yeah, that's completely fake. And then that's only going to get worse in the next few years with AI as well. Like, it's going to be a complete clusterfuck with deep fakes. Yeah,
because like around this time, like YouTube kind of was a little bit more of a mystery when you would come across certain things of it being like, oh, is this real, or is, because I mean, I'm pretty sure 2014, 2015 is whenever I started using Final Cut and like, figuring stuff out. So like it kind of makes sense in that. But then for this one too, like, it's also who found this footage and who edited it. It's not, I can't even give Toby credit for this one, because I don't even think it's Toby.
No.
Because I'm pretty sure Jesse's possessed by a different demon anyways. So in my head I was like, so maybe because there's a thing where Jesse says he loses time and he like blackouts randomly, and there'll be like random cuts to stuff. So I'm like, is he editing during these blackouts? Is that how this film came together? Like, he films this footage and like at 3 a.m. with his blacked out eyes, he's like hunched over his computer. That's why he's so tired.
That's why he's like, I'm so tired. I feel like I haven't gotten any sleep, because he's like sleep editing.
He needs some blue light glasses. That's what he's missing.
So the other night, my wife was sleep singing, I had to wake her up from a nightmare. And she was in the Insidious house. Like, she said, like, you know that movie where there's like the kid near the ghost kid near the washing machine? And I'm like, Insidious? She's like, yes. She was like, it was in a house like that. And I couldn't convince the owners that their house was haunted, so I started singing to them. And I remember this because, like, she woke me up with this like deep baritone voice. She doesn't have a baritone voice, and she was singing like a warning to them in her sleep at like 4 a.m. And I'm just like, wake up, wake up.
You're like, I've been warned, I promise.
It was kind of hysterical, like, but it was also 4 o'clock in the morning. And they're using GoPros. I will give the kids a little bit of credit, like, for the early stuff in the movie, because, like, I know it's pre-TikTok, but kids tend to film themselves just doing the dumbest shit. Like, they film themselves doing everything, but not when crazy witch people are running at them screaming like banshees with knives. Like, that's when you put the camera down. There's no need to be recording that.
Yeah, like, I mean, because like whenever they also like are filming themselves like playing basketball, it's like, okay, that makes sense, like in case, you know, you do something cool and it's like, oh hey, I needed that on camera. So it's like, you know, I kind of get it in that angle. But yeah, like as things keep over, you know, the only thing that I'm like and now I feel like it's kind of a cop out in a lot of found footage films is like they'll keep filming because the camera has a light on it. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, yes, that makes sense, but also that's such a cop out because you know, like there's other light sources you can find besides it being the camera. But I mean, I thought the GoPro was cool. I honestly wish they would have used it a little bit more. I feel like it was underutilized. Like, I mean, I love like the whole vent sequence. I think is actually fantastic because like it's them being, you know, stupid horny boys, and then it going from like this like, oh hey look, a naked lady, oh no, they're drawing satanic symbols on her stomach now. Like what is a really fun scene and like really creative, and like the because the layout of their apartment complex is very important as well, and it like kind of emphasizes that, you know, Jesse's apartment is right above Anna's. So I would have taken more GoPro footage, but it felt organic again. Like I feel like they do a good job of when they're bringing in stuff that is popular at the time, and like this is definitely when GoPros were like exploding at the time, but it didn't feel like he says GoPro, but he only says it once, and he just like he got it for free from like bartering with the pawn shop guy, which I mean that's a pretty good deal. $200 for this camera, and he threw in a GoPro for free. Like that's a good ass deal. Yep,
absolutely. That guy was I don't think he knew the value of what he had at that point, and he kept going lower and look, 300, no, 250, all right, 200, and I'll throw this in, you know.
Jesse didn't even have like aggressive bartering tactics. No. His only tactic was going, okay, well I guess I'm gonna leave then, and then the guy would be like, oh wait, no, it's like it was like
I'll let you bang my wife, like, you know. That would have been like the next.
Yeah, definitely felt like a comedy bit of like the person that doesn't know how to barter.
So you mentioned the apartment building and the layout, and I want to bring that up, and now might be a good time to do it. How do you feel about the setting of this movie? Because I like it. I like that this is the first film to really get us out of the suburbs, that it's the first movie to not focus on like a upper middle class, like white family, because it feels like there's like much more of a community feel to this movie. That because like we're not trapped inside of one location, there already feels like the stakes are much greater. That if like whatever is, and we see it because we see multiple kids that are taken over in this movie. If whatever wants to get out really escapes, if this plan comes into fruition, a lot more persons are going to be in danger in this than just like one child.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the switching because, like, I mean, for one, it it also like the lived in angle and having more people and more of a community and like switching the location almost it makes the film look a little bit better as well. Like it, because the other films, like it feels like we're not even like in a real place. Like by Paranormal Activity 4, we are in paranormal, Ville, California at that point, and like there's like kind of this like very starkness and like kind of just like very standard, like it doesn't have depth, like just having this in a different location and having people like it's like jarring, like watching his like graduation party and you're like, this is the most people that have ever been in a Paranormal Activity movie. And that continues on. Like I like that we use multiple locations where we see what the neighborhood looks like, not even just his apartment complex, but like the neighborhood even. We kind of get a pretty good idea of.
Yeah.
And I really like that. It doesn't take away the haunted house angle completely, but just shifts it a little bit, because now instead of it being a haunted house that we are inside of, it's more of the, like when you're going around with your friends and it's like, oh hey, look, that's that one abandoned house and it's probably haunted and this happened, and like people speculating of what happened there. So that's what we have with Anna's spooky apartment that is then turned into a crime scene, I suppose, and they use that, so it's like you still get haunted house elements, but it's completely different now. It's like more the urban legend kind of style of a haunted location. So I like the switch up in general for all of this.
Yeah, and I just think too, you get like such a different energy, and I know that's what they were going for with this movie. You have like the two party sequences, like you have the graduation party, which is more like of the family getting together, and it's a bit more laid back, and it's a bit more chaste might be the wrong word. I mean, because there is like a vibrancy that is there to it, but Jesse and Hector like aren't trying to get their Mac on when they're at that party. And then you go to one later on when they're like, we're going to go to this party and we have one thing on our mind, like we want to get laid. And they immediately go to like two of the most like, honestly, probably two of the most beautiful women that you will see in this whole series. And they're like, can we get with these young ladies? And it's like a much different vibe to that party. And it's such a different feel from what we get from like Alex and Allie in part 2 and 4, where, Alex has like two friends over to have pizza and drink a little bit of soda, and she's like, you people are slobs, there's like, you're not putting the Pepsi can on the coaster and my parents are gonna kill me. And like her reality is so much different, and the culture shock is so much different from what you're seeing here. It's kind of awesome, and it's kind of great to see that.
It was instantly endearing, like just that graduation party. Like it was like, oh hey, look, we have a family and they love each other and they're very proud of Jesse and like this, everything. And like, so it's like you're instantly endeared to him and his family. You're also endeared to him and Hector's friendship throughout the entire film. But yeah, even just having that it makes such a difference. And then like multiple parties in this one, and I love that his ghost powers give him the confidence to go crash this other one. Is really fun.
Yeah, and just like things like in the extended cut, because I don't think like the street vendor taco scene is in the theatrical cut. I think that's only in the extended when they go and he gets like $2 for eating like the ghost pepper tacos basically, and like spits them out because they're way too hot. But just like seeing that flavor of like Los Angeles as well. So my sister went to school out there. She was in school in Los Angeles, and I would go visit her, and she lived in like a pretty similar neighborhood, and she actually like dated and was engaged to a short time to a dude who played in like a Latinx like hardcore band. So like I would like hang out with all of them. And it was like a very similar vibe in like neighborhood when we would kind of go out there, and it kind of made me long for those days of like going to like chill with those and go to shows out there whenever we would go visit one another. And it like watching this movie, you felt like, okay, when the bad shit goes down in this movie, especially knowing that like Anna's apartment is right under Jesse's apartment. And not only that, there are all these other units all around it. And then there are tunnels under these units. All of these other people are in this immediate danger. It's not just this one family in this one house. It's this greater sense of community. But not only do you have like that danger, you have the danger from like, I think it's like the 805 gang. You have the danger that is posed from the cops. Like you have like, they don't trust for, any number of correct reasons. We're not going to go to the cops and talk to them about this because we can't trust the police. So they're also like very isolated amongst themselves as well.
Yeah, because they're in like a offshoot neighborhood from Oxnard, which I've not actually been to Oxnard since I've been out here. But it definitely gave me like Inglewood vibes of like, hanging out, and it's like a lot more a different sense of community for sure. And like even the fact that like him and Hector like live in the same apartment complex, like because they've been so you can like kind of assume that they've like grown up and like pretty much probably have lived there their whole lives. And even the angle that like there's these tunnels underneath, and then it's the apartment complex, and it like kind of goes into the idea of like these are lower social class. And the idea of like that they've just been getting built on top of and exploited, so it's like there was something else and then they just built an apartment complex on it. But it's like the apartment complex seems to be probably going down, and eventually they're just going to build back on top of that again, so like it kind of goes into that. And I like how they bring in the midwives in that too, that like, not only are these people being exploited and gentrified over, causing these creepy tunnels underneath, but they've also been getting exploited by this coven of witches.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I like that. They exploited by, like, they're using that area and using these buildings to kind of put this nefarious plan into place. And there's no shortage, like setting up shop in that community. There's no shortage of like vulnerable young women. The community that I work in isn't necessarily like heavily Latinx. It's more Cape Verdean, Haitian, and African American. But there's like no shortage of like very young single parents that are in dire straits. You could see like this movie shifting to the community I work in and seeing like those persons falling under like this prey, like, oh, just give us your firstborn and you'll be set for life, and don't worry, you'll have plenty of other kids to worry about. You know what I mean? Like going after targeting their firstborn.
Yeah, and it's fascinating too, because like all the grandmas, like the Latino grandmas, they are so not about it. But then you notice that's the generation underneath them. So it's Oscar's mom, it's Jesse's mom. And I like how even when they discover that one picture, and I like that it is distinctly, yes, we have Anna that is, we know is kind of been a part of the coven, but distinctly seeing Lois in the picture and Marisol going, who's that white lady? Like saying it with like the distrust of like, not distrusting her because, oh, that's a witch, but it's just like, hey, what is this, proper looking white lady doing with our mom? Like even that I think was very specific.
And can I tell you who a lot of families don't often trust? Like when I have to call them or see them, or they come into my office at school and they know that I'm like the mental health guy. They're like, this guy, like who has two thumbs, and like a lot of families don't initially trust, like me, because like I am often seen as like part of the system or part of the problem. And I can understand that because like let's be honest, like I sometimes don't have like the full cultural awareness that I try to have to fully understand where they're coming. As much as I try to, there are cultural gaps that I have. And they can feel like exploited or misunderstood. So you can see like they're looking at Lois being like, yeah, they're probably not saying, this lady is definitely stealing our firstborn guys and like giving them off to demons. But, you know, they're thinking she ain't here to give us like cookies and fresh diapers.
Yeah, there's like an interesting difference in awareness because it's like obviously like we see Lois and the other grandmas in 3 that they are aware of what they're doing and they know versus like they are now dipping into different neighborhoods and stuff and are probably not being like honest with like what is actually they're probably still playing up though like, oh hey, if you do this we can give you this, and like it's more enticing for people in this neighborhood versus, so it's like, like not telling them like, oh, hey, you get to like live forever and like you get these witch powers. But it's like, now we know that it's like, they're not even trying to give everyone that power. They are now just trying to take more power by creating this army of marked ones, apparently is their plan.
Yeah. Which makes sense. Like that's where the name comes from. Like all these firstborn males are marked, like they're chosen from the beginning. So.
Yeah, the little bite mark that Jesse and Oscar both have, which was that was a very annoying cut though, because we go from like Jesse at night like observing creepy stuff, and then just cuts to the next morning and he wakes up and he's like, oh hey, I got this bite on my arm. It was kind of a little bit of annoying as far as this being again like focused on it being the marked ones. I would have liked to have seen the mark actually getting marked.
That might be a check mark in the favor of like Jesse being the editor of this movie, being a shitty editor up at 3 a.m. trying to put this together while possessed. Like not exactly doing Thelma Schumacher's work here.
Terrible with continuity.
Yeah,
Jesse.
not going to be doing great right there. You need to do some work there, my friend. So all of the Paranormal Activity movies tend to introduce something new in order to kind of like push the frights along, make you feel something unnerving. And in the last movie, they used like something that would have been like kind of the height of gaming technology at the time, where they were using like the Xbox Kinect. Here they scale it, and I think like it's a smart move for a couple reasons, but they scale it way back and they use something really simple with Simon. And I'm wondering what you think of the use of the Simon here as a stand-in for the Ouija board, as a way to communicate. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it because of course I love me a classic Ouija board, but I like that we get still the Ouija board vibes to it, and this one having sound effects I think are a nice touch to it, like because there's at one point when the red light like keeps going off and then
creepy,
and then the sound pitches down like after a few beeps, and then it's like, oh shit, like so I thought that was really fun, and it also makes sense for this family. It's like Marisol and Jesse, they don't got video games laying around. Like even his computer is like one of like the like old desktops that is like kind of 5 years out of date, even in the timeline of the movie. And so it's like, yeah, it makes sense that they're not gonna be able to do it with like a new technology, kind of doing it with a more simpler technology. I like it a lot.
I really dug it, and I guess Landon said that he controlled, like, he had a remote that would say, like, the yes or the no, and he didn't tell, like, the performers whether or not what he was going to push. So, like, the one point when he asked, like, are you my guardian angel? And it went no, like, that genuinely surprised them because they were expecting a different answer, so that really took them aback. And I like to exactly your point, like when it extends that no out for a good like 5 to 10 seconds and the no pitches downward, that's really creepy. And it's such a simple scare that I think it actually works like really, really well for the movie.
Yeah, I think one of the better ones too that was like very small was like you said, after "Are you my guardian angel?" it says no, and then they say "Are you good?" and it just doesn't answer, and like they just don't do it. So like even the tension of waiting for it to answer that question, I was like, oh, and then just doesn't. It's like, well, that's creepy as fuck. Like,
yeah.
I'm not your guardian angel, and then dips. Like that's a fucking scary demon.
So. Do you think it doesn't answer because it just doesn't really have a concept of good or bad in morality? Like, just like those words don't mean anything to it? Like
oh,
what
no,
are these?
No, I think it knows. I think it knows and is willingly just being like I mean, because I think at that point they're just like, I'm just not going to answer because I can't scare them off too much. Because if if they instantly were just like, no, I'm not good, then it's like, oh, well, then they're going to stop talking to it and they're going to stop doing more things. So like, I think it's more just like, I just won't answer just so that way I can keep you on the hook a little bit more.
No. All right. I can see that. I just don't, sometimes I wonder, like, when you get to the spirit world or the demon world, if there's like, we're just things, like your idea of like, we're good or bad, like, because like, do you eat meat?
Yes.
I eat meat. Like, I love me a cow. Like, if I could just put a steak in front of me right now, like, I'd be eating steak. So I'm sure to, like, cows, like, I'm pretty evil. Because it's like, dude, you're eating my brother. Like, that's pretty fucked up, man. But I don't consider myself evil. So, like, to a demon...
Well, yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? Like, this idea of, like, of course we're going to possess you. That's the shit that we do, you know?
Oh yeah, like I mean, yeah, they definitely are in the know of like of what they do, and maybe they see it as a good thing. I'm curious because we see a name written on the wall at one point. Because I had been asking in previous films, I was like, are all the coven members all connected to Toby specifically, or are there other demons in the mix? So do we think this is not Toby because we don't get the standard like heavy footsteps from Jesse like whenever he is possessed? We see a different name written on a wall. So do we think that the coven is in taps with other demons and this is not Toby in this one?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that it's Toby in this one. I think because like I know you have like the Toby is a Horcrux theory and he's spreading himself out, but I think that you have
the scale's too big. They need more demons.
Like, because if you spread yourself too thin, like that is eventually what did Voldemort in, is he spread himself like way too thin. There were too many Horcruxes and he ended up doing himself dirty by making too many. And here where you have like a near infinite amount of like young male children to put yourself into, oh my God, that doesn't sound right at all. Edit. When you have like a near amount of bodies to possess, I think you have like basically like a portal to like some sort of demonic world and a near amount of like infinite amount of demons that are like looking to get into this world. Because like I think with like the 7th movie, it's like not Toby, it's a different demon that possesses someone. So like you're expanding the world out with different demons at this point. And I think it's like Mouse or Moose.
Yeah,
Meus.
Yeah, Moose.
Yeah. So nice of them to kind of put their name on the wall, like they want to be acknowledged, like it's the tribal chief. So,
like, do you think that demon is jealous of Toby of all the attention he's been getting? He's like, hey, I'm out here possessing people too. Yeah. We will get focus back on Toby later, but
maybe
in the next film is what I mean.
Possibly could be. Possibly could be. What do you think of the? When I'm watching this movie, what is different about it too is it's not your typical possession movie in that it's just like Jesse starts automatically doing demon stuff. You see Jesse is almost like a superhero origin story. And specifically, there's like another movie that came out, was it 2013? Like 2012, like Josh Trank's Chronicle, which you said off air is a movie you really love. So I'll turn it over to you. Can you maybe talk about maybe a comparison between the two movies? I think I want to go back and watch Chronicle again because I remember really enjoying that, despite it being written by Max Landis, who's a chode, really loving Chronicle when it came out and seeing it in theaters.
Oh yeah, I Chronicle is one of my all-time favorite films. It's like in my top 50. Love this film and Chronicle itself. I'm gonna sneak it on to Spectre Cinema at some point because I can make a case for Chronicle also being a horror film. But I like that this one. It's not just like the instant possession and deterioration. It's like he's hopped up on it and he's powerful, and having those powers folds so well again into the coming of age, feeling yourself in a different way, feeling a different confidence that you're like trying to find, and like giving yourself this new identity. So it's like, him having this power at first is really fun. I think, then it like kind of makes it, be like, oh, hey, this possession isn't too bad until it does start getting bad. Mm-hmm. And it's very similar in Chronicle too, because like the more they like use their powers, then like that's why Dane DeHaan's character like kind of goes off the deep end, because he's using too much, and it's like changing him and makes him like go into the darker route. So like there is a very similar character arc for the two of them as well, and it also like kind of then makes the possession feel like a more like a viral disease in a way, that like or like drugs, like like the drugs make you feel good and like all the things, but then the side effects then start catching up. So but yeah, definitely between the power corrupting him, but then also just seeing then the again like the shenanigans that they are doing whenever like, because that's some of the most fun parts of Chronicles too, is like when they are just goofing off with their powers and like doing silly stuff. And that's like what I love about that film, because like, hey, not everybody that gets powers instantly wants to become a superhero, and
right.
that doesn't happen in this either. Like there's no point where Jesse's like, oh, hey, let's go help some people, or let's go use these powers for good. It's like, no, let's just do stunts.
Let's do skateboard tricks.
Yeah, let's do skateboard tricks. Let's do the biggest laugh for me in the entire film is whenever they're doing the like trust fall thing,
mm-hmm.
And they're doing it off the chair, and he gets Hector to do it, and Hector just goes straight back and falls on his back. Is one of the funniest things in any of these Paranormal Activity movies. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, it's one of the better parts, and then also like when it's introduced, like him like being able to like ward off the gang members who, it's weird because they're introduced like a couple times in the movie, like for no reason they're harassing like Hector and Jesse. Like they kind of like just come up on them randomly, almost like they almost kind of like spawn like, evil characters in a video game. Like they just show up wherever these two guys are at just to kind of like pound on them a little bit. And then, that's when Jesse's powers seem to be like put into action for the first time, like when he kind of wards them off.
Yeah, which is, because there's multiple times where these gang members, I get at for one thing, it's like, stop filming them all the time. Like if a gang member sees a camera on them, they're gonna come for you. So they kind of put themselves in a situation a couple times. But then at the basketball court one, that was just like a complete random one. I guess like maybe the word had been getting around about them that like, hey, they have this camera that they've been rolling around with, go snag it from them. And then that's whenever it activates his super demon powers.
Yeah. So let's talk about the scares of the horror of this movie before we wrap it up with like the final act. Because this is a shift. It goes from being like a haunted house movie and like a demon kind of lurking around like the outer periphery to this is like a much more overtly religious horror movie, like, and specifically like Catholic religious horror movie. And a traditional possession film. How do you feel that shift works?
Yeah, I was saying earlier, I think this is one of the least scary of the franchise. Like that did kind of take my score down on this one a little bit, because like even just like like we want to see new and different stuff, but like we do still want to see some of the classic creeps and stuff like that, and we just don't really get that in this film. Like there's like a couple scenes where they're like in the tunnels and they're like behind that like flimsy plastic stuff or whatever, and like something's going on the outside. Like those moments like don't really work for me. And like we have like, you know, sound tappings that we just hear at night. Like we don't have as many of the visual like slight creeps. Like we don't really get to do any of our like I spy scares where we're like, you know, watching the screen and like trying to see where the creepiness is happening. And even I think even going into the religious horror, I think they don't really go into it enough. Like I think the Black Mirror scene in the church had potential to be something really creepy and interesting, and they kind of do nothing with it.
Yeah.
They hear some bangs and it rattles a bathroom stall door. Like that's literally the only thing that we get out of that entire sequence. I thought that they could have done something very fun and creepy with it. And like if you're going to be in the church doing a ritual, like make some, you know, like very specifically religious horror things happen, and we don't really get any of that.
There's no need for that scene to be set in a church. Like you could have done that in the middle of the convenience store that is right next door for all of the iconography that you take advantage of in that scene. There's like you said, like you just get a bathroom stall door to you just get a bathroom stall door to open and close a little bit. Like that's really it. I feel like this series is at its best when it keeps it simple, and there are some things that it does do really well here, and then it follows it up with trying to go too big. So like there's the scene with like Jesse in the bathroom, and he's kind of exploring some changes to his body, like when he pulls out like this long thin kind of like strand from his eye. Like that's a pretty creepy use of body horror, and I really like that. But you immediately follow that up with like a jump scare that's like heavy CGI, and he has a demon face, and I'm like, those are the kind of things that are like less effective for me, because you're just like tipping your hand a little bit too much, and I just like, and maybe others feel differently, but I don't need to see that.
I've never been a fan of the scary face stuff in this franchise, like as they do it with Katie and some of the other films as well. Like I've never, like the scary face is so dumb.
I think where it works well are some of the more psychological scares that they're able to take advantage of and use in this movie. I think one of the things, and there's almost like in some ways like a nod to The Exorcist in this, where you have like the top of the stairwell, like you have the steps in Georgetown in The Exorcism, or I'm sorry, in The Exorcist, and you have after Irma does her kind of makeshift exorcism the night before with like the eggs and the ritual, and like Jesse kind of like looking kind of like rode hard and put away wet by the end of it, and looking really ill, but they feel like it's worked. They think that it's done. And the next day when he wakes up, when Irma disappears and Jesse is like standing at the top of the stairwell, and the camera like really slowly kind of pans around to him, and he turns his face so it's just in profile, and he's a hot, sweaty mess, but he has this really devious grin on his face, and you pan to the bottom of the stairs, and there's Irma. And we have grown to like Irma. Like part of it is like she's an earned character. Like we've seen her like drink tequila shots with her grandson, and we've seen her like take the Simon away. And one of the things I like about this movie is it doesn't give you her translations when she's speaking. Okay,
which I'm a big fan of
that. But you understand the context from like her body language, from the tone of her voice. Like she's like, do not be messing with these forces. This is a no-no. Like you said, the grandmothers are the ones that don't want us to be messing with these forces. And we don't learn what Irma's fate is. We know she's in the hospital, but we see her like bleeding out at the bottom of the stairwell. And her grandson, who she's raised, because his mother died as an infant, and the dad is pretty checked out. Like dad is working like 18-hour shifts, it looks like, to just kind of keep a roof up. Like, dad is like probably working 2 jobs and not there a lot. And it looks like he shares a room with his dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I got that impression, is like the way that room is laid out, like that other bed in there is Dad's bed. And it's, if you notice, like, he's never in it. Like, he's always working. So Grandma's kind of raised him.
It's almost to a comedic degree, because I remember at one point I was just like, what's his dad doing? And then it's like one of like the 3 scenes where his dad does come home like late at night, and he's just like, I'm coming home from work. And it's just like, yeah, he really is.
The one with Chavo?
No, but that's one of the scenes that I think is one of the creepiest, though. Whenever Jesse has Chavo on the ceiling, like fucking with him, I was like, oh no! I was like, please stop
Poor
that. And he's like giggling while he's doing it, and it's just like that's like one of the creepier things. Shout out Grandma Irma, Abuela Irma. She is because I do love when they don't do the giving us her translation. So now I want to ask somebody that like does speak fluently, because I wonder if like they have like a completely different experience with this film, because like Irma's in the film quite a bit. Like and like has a good amount of times where she's speaking but we don't know what she's saying. So it's like I want somebody that does speak fluent Spanish to watch this and see if you get like a whole layer of context with her. But yeah, so like the creepier moments with him, like kind of doing these things that like act out of character, do work for me. But then it's like, we don't get like as much as like the like haunting scares, like just like kind of don't really do it. But and then the final act is just kind of goes all over the place.
We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll definitely get to that. How do you feel about this being the first movie? And I think aside from Next of Kin, which is its own thing, how do you feel about it being really the only movie that doesn't use the like night 1, night 5, like having those cues and the static cameras? Like, do you miss that, or do you feel like, man, it's kind of refreshing 5 films in to not have to like rely on that trope?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty neutral on the night cards, because I mean it telegraphs too much, because like after we've watched so many of these films, it's like, okay, in nights 1 through 6, like it's gonna be like small stuff, and then it's like, okay, it's night 11, we're gonna see something, like we're gonna see our first big thing, and like so it's like it telegraphs it the whole time. And so I don't really need that. I like that it's just like, hey, we open up at a graduation, so we know that it is the beginning of summer. That's really all we need as far as what time it is. I don't think that the night cards would have added anything to this film. So yeah, I'm totally good with them not being in this one.
Agree. And I'm trying to find a little piece here. Like, we talked about how the religious horror ties into it, and whether Christopher Landon was like a good person to maybe tie into like the Latino, the Latinx portion of it. And I found this article from Bloody Disgusting. It was published in 2020, written by Ron Breton. It said, underrated Paranormal Activity, the Mark Ones left white suburbia to explore fresh new horrors. And he talks about his own upbringing, and he talks about what this film got right. And I just wanted to pull like a brief little quote from it, like what it felt it got right, and how he felt it served his community in terms of like the paranormal subculture itself. And I'll just bring this up right here. So this is a piece from the article that talks about what he got right. It says, later in the film, we see Jesse's drastic change in personality, becoming increasingly violent, not only to Marisol and Hector, but to his family as well. The situation becomes so dire that Irma visits a botanica, a store commonly known in Latinx culture for selling herbal remedies, religious charms, and spiritual cleansings. This rather minute scene is actually a great example of the attention to detail that Marked One's writer-director Christopher Landon pays to the Latinx community and its heritage. Those who are Latinx and were raised in practicing households, such as myself, know of the illustrious botanica, where parents and or older family members would go and collect religious artifacts for the home. And this is just one of the many instances in which the film references real, tangible things in the collective unconscious of Latinx culture. In an earlier sequence, Hector jokingly references El Cuque, an urban legend that is passed on to children who misbehave, comparable to that of the boogeyman. And I thought like that was like a good scene as well when they're going to get like the things they want for the exorcism, because like you go in that store and it's basically, as opposed to Toys R Us, it's like Jesus R Us, and it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be comforting, but there's just something about having that many religious artifacts under one roof and knowing what the purpose of them in this specific context is going to be. It's a little unnerving.
It's also interesting too, because I think they do a really good job of showing the kind of melding of the different generational beliefs, because they often, because like they're aware of it because of like these stories that have been like passed down. So it's like they're aware of things, but at the same time whenever Irma is like saying stuff about bad spirits and things like that, they don't write her off, because they're like, oh yeah, no, we know what you're talking about, like, because this has kind of been ingrained, but knowing that they kind of believe a little bit more than they do. And then like even at the store is kind of fascinating, because it's like, yes, it like you see like the religious artifacts and things like that, but then it's like also like, you know, a spray can of "go away, demon." So it's like almost kind of like exploiting some of like the beliefs of, you know, this older community to like kind of take advantage. But like, yeah, of course this you know, aerosol can is gonna ward away demons. You know, I like when Irma is like kind of doing her more own things. And it's also like a stark difference between like two, like whenever she's doing stuff, they don't, you know, freak out and be like, oh no, stop doing all that witchcraft like fucking Daniel did to Martine. They're just like, okay, hey, let her do it. It's gonna make her
thing.
Yeah, it makes her feel better. She's looking out for us, like it's fine. So when she's like scrubbing with vinegar or doing whatever, they're just like, yeah, it's fine. It's totally cool.
And that definitely feels cultural, where there is a lot more respect for like the matriarchal figures and the older figures within families, and within even like without family, like being more respectful towards one elders and like holding them in a higher regard, where someone like Daniel was like, this is just a paid employee, fuck them, this is my house, I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah.
Daniel continues to be we might, when we do like a ranking of the movies, we might actually do a ranking of like the worst characters too.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Have some fun with it.
His stench is echoed in 3 movies later still.
Yeah. God, he's the worst. All right. Let's talk about the third act, because I think like this was like on par to be like one of the best entries for me until we get to the third act, which is really where it goes off the rails. And I made a note, it's where the marked ones becomes the murked ones, because you have Jesse getting kidnapped by the midwives after they like smash into the side of the vehicle. But before that, Marisol like conks him over the head with a pipe or a baseball bat to knock him out, because he's attacking his friend. So she knocks him out, which I didn't know you could knock a demon out with that, but there you go. Then he is kidnapped. They bring him to the house where Lois's house from the third movie. Hector and Marisol recruit Arturo, who's a gang member.
And Oscar's older brother.
Who was one of the characters who was possessed earlier and commits. He completes suicide in order to no longer be cursed. And
Oscar is also a literal jump scare. Like,
yes.
how many jump scares in the movie are just Oscar jumping
Just
down
him.
onto a roof or coming out from the trap door?
Yeah.
Like, literally a jump scare character.
And in Oscar, who was the valedictorian of his school, when you know it, his older brother is a gang member, because you have to have that. You have to have that kind of trope in here. Valedictorian brother, gang member, other brother. Him and his buddy, who I only could describe as like Mexican Ving Rhames. Like, that was like what he looked like. They go fully packing shotguns to this house. And for like a short while, like, I wanted so much more of this, of like them just blasting witches with shotguns, because that was awesome for the 15 seconds you get of it.
Oh my goodness, yeah, it's so fun. It's like such a funny juxtaposition from 3, like you were saying. Like, Dennis could have taken all these lays, but they had the numbers on their side in that one, and same in 4. But then, yeah, it was annoying that, because we saw in Paranormal Activity 4, like, there were like 70 Coven members coming after Allie at the end. So it's like, where were the numbers here for this one? Because we could have easily been shotgun blasting midwives left and right for a good minute, but it's just very satisfying, like, whenever they like roll up and they're just like immediately go to the trunk, just like, hey, like, we don't know what's going on, like, they are ready, they got gloves on too and everything. Like, I thought that was really fun.
I'm starting to think this wasn't Arturo's first time shooting someone to death with a shotgun.
Definitely
I don't
not.
think this was his first rodeo doing this.
I love returning to the same location too,
I
of
like
Grandma
that.
Lois's house. I thought that was really dope.
Yeah. I just like, from this point on though, it is just like, and we've been talking about it, it's redundant. Like, it's what we've seen in the end of part 2. It's what we've seen in the end of part 3. It's what we've seen at the end of part 4, where it's like, I'm going to run around with a camera. It's going to be really loud. I'm going to scream someone's name. Poor Marisol, who we haven't really talked about a lot here, but like, she's like the other part of the friend group who's like pretty wise. Like, she's a core part of the group. She gets done really dirty. Her body just like drops from the ceiling and she's dead. And you're like, well, she's gone. And you have, I keep like forgetting Hector's name. You have Hector just like screaming, and it's just everything I've already seen. And then like Jesse shows up, and you get literally the same thing you get at the end of part 4, where he comes running at, this time instead of Katie, it's him running at his friend with a demon face, and he shuts himself behind a door to block him out. It's like the same thing. It's almost like Landon doesn't trust himself to do something different.
Yeah, it's and again, it also, like, once we get to this point, like, it kind of puts the biggest, why are you still filming at this point? Like, because there's no reason Hector needs to be filming any of this. That's kind of happening. So it's like, we're kind of, which sucks that it comes back to back off of, we go from shooting midwives and we're like, okay, like, we're going to have like a kind of action horror ending, and then going back to like kind of the kind of same usual stuff. Marisol does get done dirty because we don't even know how that even happened. Like, she just at some point disappears, and then I do like that they do like a little fake out scare though with it, because Hector's looking at the chair
and it starts to come up.
Yeah, you see the sheet come up, and then that's when Marisol comes through. So I like the little bait and switch from it. I thought that was a nice little thing there. But then just like the way that like, it's up there for me with the ending of 4. That's just like, it feels so abrupt. It's like Hector gets got, and then that's the end of it. So, but then
you mentioned the end of part 4, where like there's the huge coven, like when like there's like a sea of witches at the end of it, where like there's no way to get through them, right? When Hector opens the door and he looks out, there's like maybe 3 or 4 witches that are there, right?
Yeah, no.
And how Hector's like 18 years old. He's in like really good physical condition, right? He's in good shape. And these are like I'm almost 50. Like, arthritis tends to set in. I can't move like I used to. these are like folks that are in their 60s and 70s. Like, he could just juke them out a little bit, like throw a little hip, little like hip,
Give him a little shake and
head
bake.
fake, little shake and bake, and then be like running down that street and like be on his way, like, peace out, I'm out of here. He's like, no, I'm just gonna shut myself in this like chamber of horrors with like, chairs that are moving on their own, my friend's dead body dropping from the ceiling, some other witch right behind me. Like, Hector's not very bright. Well, we've already seen this, I guess. Like, Hector's dumb.
Yeah, it's like this. It feels like this is like almost a parody of like horror people doing dumb stuff. Like, because there's just really like no reason for any of that. It's like, why are you going up the stairs? Like, that's not gonna get you to escape this house. Easily could have spin moved his way out of there and booked it. So it's like it almost feels intentional that it's like, oh hey, like, to have our horror movie ending, we have to have them doing the traditional horror movie dumb stuff.
And all of this isn't the most egregious thing. All of this isn't even the worst part of it. What you end up happening is like Jesse breaks through the door that Hector is hiding behind, like the room he's hiding in, and Hector like goes through this other door, which ends up being a portal that now introduces time travel to the series, like, which we have not had before, and that will become much more important in the next entry. And we end up in another house, not even the same house now. We're in a different house. It is no longer 2012. It is 2006, and we are back in Katie and Mika's home. And we are at the very end of the first Paranormal Activity as Katie comes walking down the steps, and is the end of Paranormal Activity. And we see, what caused her to start screaming at the end of that movie, which is like a young man has just suddenly appeared in her kitchen. And then Mika comes running down the stairs and attacks Hector. And then Katie turns her attention to Mika and stabs him to death. And then Hector, like, runs away, bumps into his demonic friend Jesse. Jesse kills him. And then, is it Katie that shuts the camera off?
No, it's a midwife.
Just some random midwife shuts the camera off.
Literally,
and end the movie.
Literally, it's some random, like, it was like some like older blonde lady. Like, I don't know if that was intended to, because I was like, is that supposed to be Lois possibly? But no, I don't think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, is it fun to like be like, okay, we're doing another callback, we're back in, like, especially like whenever Hector's in and we recognize the furniture, and then like as soon as it like gets like to like where their like living room was with like the coffee table, it's like, oh shit, like, and that's kind of fun. But now
I hated it.
But now, like, because I remember the first time it like blew my mind. The first time watching it blew my mind. I was like, oh, this is kind of crazy. But now, like, when you rewatch it, it just brings up too many questions. And it also like now kind of like does it retroactively like ruin the mystique of the first one, because you watch the first one and it's like, oh, what was she screaming at? We don't know, and that makes it like. Assuming it was something super scary, super terrible. No, it was just Hector.
She was luring him to his death. I just always assumed she was like, it was, and we're recording on Zoom and not Zencaster, so I can't do the Admiral Akbar, it's a trap. Like, I just assumed that that's all she was doing, was like yelling to get him to run down so she could stab him with a kitchen knife. Like, that's all it was. Like, because Mika was also not very bright. So he came running.
And then so now and then they kill Hector. So it's like, wait, so now is there just a version of Jesse back in time now? If Hector getting killed in the house, does that kill younger Hector that is also in that timeline somewhere? There's too many questions that it brings up. And even them doing it, because for some reason in my mind I thought there was an instance earlier in the movie where they go through a portal or something, but that doesn't happen. So
Because
maybe
you
if
see Katie and Christy, but they're just in the basement.
and they're the younger versions too.
Yeah.
It's the kid versions of them, which is makes no sense either.
Yeah.
But like, so again, like if with that Black Mirror scene, if they would have like introduced it there, and then like it be a callback later, it wouldn't have felt as jarring, you know. So it's very clunky and sloppy, and I hate that it just ends with Hector getting got by demon face. Like that's...
It's literally the same ending as part 4 when like Alex turns around when she's trying to move Hunter/Wyatt and can't, and then she turns around when the coven shows up and there's Katie, and Katie makes a demon face and like the camera drops. It's the same ending. And, you know, you have, like, Landon making the apology tour in part 4. Like, yeah, we made some mistakes. What if we end it the same way? It just, you just said, going back in time, and that, again, plays into my theory that Christopher Landon is a huge fan of Back to the Future, because what movie was featured in Back to the Future but Huey Lewis and the News's Back in Time? So, again... I think that played very heavily, Huey Lewis, Michael J. Fox, the Zemeckis, all of this plays into my theory that Christopher Landon just wants to make a remake of Back to the Future.
Yeah, and it's odd that, of all like the fresh ideas that this film has, that the next movie would take this part, the clunky time travel part, like, oh hey, yeah, the part that totally worked, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. And it's like no, like there's more interesting stuff that we could have plucked from this one. And
so so here's the original ending, and I kind of made this note. I said this online yesterday. What I find, I like this series, but what I find frustrating is the theatrical endings tend to be like the least interesting thing in the movie. And all of these movies, or almost all of these movies, tend to have like much more interesting endings. The next one in particular, like when we talk about that, I'm like, oh, that actually is really cool. And there's a lot more to discuss, and it's kind of like really weird. So this one, the original ending, they enlist Arturo's help to take Jesse to a church, and they actually are able to exorcise Jesse's demon. But after that, they're attacked by the coven members, and the ending concludes with Jesse and Hector observing a small fire that starts from within the church. So like they're able to exorcise the demon. Jesse's all right, but like the coven is like trying to wipe out any trace of them, and you don't know, are they able to get out? Like, are they able to escape? Are they able to and then you could actually have them around for the next movie. Like that to me is like a much more fascinating ending than what you end up with here.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe they didn't go that route because it would be a happy ending, and that's not the Paranormal Activity way. And it's a bummer because this franchise broke my PS3 apparently, because now I've had to switch to watching on streaming. So I couldn't check on the Blu-ray like for the deleted scenes of the original ending. There's you can get a little bit of it on YouTube, but it's only like a minute, and it's the part where you see them exorcising Jesse. So you can find that on YouTube, but I can't. But I wasn't able to double check if it's on the Blu-ray or not.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered it. I think we've hit all the salient points here. Any final thoughts?
I guess, like I said, this is definitely what I categorize as a hot mess. Like there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of good things going on, but then there's also some like kind of glaring mistakes as well. So but again, I would rather, give me something like that than something safe and boring. So it still gets a lot more credit over 4. And again, I think this cast is honestly fantastic. Like I know we kind of touched on, we mainly talked about Hector and Jesse, who have like a really great friendship, but then Marisol being there as well. I love that there wasn't a there wasn't like a romantic subplot with Marisol. I'm really glad that it was just like, no, she's one of the boys, and now we're hunting demons, and she's, you know, trying to help. Jesse's sister is also in the film quite a bit as well, and they have like a little fun relationship too. So like I think this cast, the chemistry of everybody and the relationships made it feel more lived in. I think it's the strongest as far as character work goes in any of the rest of the franchise. And Hector is honestly maybe my favorite character besides Dennis in this franchise, because he is so funny, so goofy. Jesse be punking him like all the time. I felt bad for Hector, but Hector has his boys back, you know, like no matter what, like, which I appreciate. Like I think he's a fantastic character in this franchise.
I agree. I think what saves this movie is the character work, especially in that first act. I like following these kids around. It's funny at times. I think like the smaller scares tend to work really well. I like the sense of community in it. It's really just the inability to stick the landing that really hurts this movie for me, and it really knocks it down. I enjoyed it more on rewatch. I think the parts I really liked during the rewatch, and kind of knowing that the ending was going to be like a bit of a hot mess. I'm like, all right, I just got to get through like this part of it at this point. It's definitely a recovery from part 4, which I just can't find anything to really like about that movie. And there's just like much more of an energy to this one, where part 4 felt like such a slog to get through. This one moves, even like the extended cut moves with like a lot of energy, and with a lot more pacing to it. I really, really dug that. So,
yeah. Also, we only briefly mentioned shout out Allie Ray having a nice cameo from 2. I think that was another addition, a good way of dipping back into the previous films was having her, because we wondered where she went, what did she do after she discovered her parents' body, and she became a midwife's expert apparently.
Yep. Well, that's it for the marked ones. We'll be back next week with the ghost dimension. But before we head out of here for the night, before we jump through that portal, what's going on with Spectre Cinema Club, my friend?
Yes, over on Spectre Cinema Club, we've been working our way through some horror anthologies, which has been very fun. So you can listen to us talk about not only some modern ones like Mortuary Collection and Southbound, but also some older ones like Quaidon and Cat's Eye. So we have a nice little range of horror anthologies going over there. New episodes every Tuesday, and you can follow me at all the usual places at _DaddyDisco.
Yeah, and you're ranking every VHS segment, you said.
Yeah, we're gonna do a tier list of I believe it's like 28 amongst the 6 films. So I got a lot of homework to do, and it's gonna be a huge episode with Donato on that one. So stoked on it.
Yeah, I think we're gonna be covering VHS later after we do Blade. I think Blade is after Paranormal Activity. So I think when we do a ranking episode, we won't do the movies. We'll do the segments, and we'll vote on all the segments as a crew. So that should be fun as well. Oh boy. Yeah, some overlap, Devon. Some overlap.
Excited for the ranking episode of this one as well.
Oh, I think we're gonna the biggest chooch bags in the series. Like, instead of just the movies, like the biggest douches, the best golden retriever guys. We'll have some fun ones to do. Well, as far as we go, visit our site, podonthependulum.com, to get all of our bonus episodes. Visit podonthependulum.com to get all of our back episodes, over 230 plus episodes at this point. Follow us on Twitter at podandpendulum. Follow us on Instagram at podandthependulum. Make sure that you are rating, reviewing, and subscribing to us everywhere that you are getting your podcast. And make sure that you are dropping us like 5 stars and a nice little note. That goes a long way to having new listeners find us and boost us up in the ranking. Thank you so much, everybody. We will be back next week with Paranormal Activity, the Ghost Dimension. This time, they promise you, you will see the activity. Oh boy. Oh boy. Can hardly wait. We're out.